All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. Sorry, we're running a little bit late there. Back to back things today for sure.
Yeah, busy stuff here as we lead into Q4. We only got a couple weeks, and then it's going to be right in front of us. So, yeah, things are moving fast.
Yeah, finally everybody's starting to talk about it. I'm like, this should have been months ago, but all right. But I get how it goes, things kind of sneak up on you. And it's very easy to catch yourself kind of stuck in the day-to-day operations of things and not carving out time strategy wise to think about like how are you planning moving into that period, all that good stuff. So
Mhm.
but it's exciting times. Got invited to a seller meetup December actually, so that'll be fun.
Nice.
So go hang out with some sellers at a house and geek out for a while, which is going to be nice. So
Love that.
always an enjoyable time for me.
Yeah, it's always good to get together and have a little brain blast session.
Exactly. I'm just checking everything, make sure we're good to go on our end here. Yeah, it looks like we're good to go. Awesome. So as everybody's jumping in, remember there was some questions. Happy to jump into whatever questions anybody has. We'll go from there. But anything top of mind, Casey?
No, I was just going to kind of open that up to the users as well who may be on the call. If there is anything top of mind, not necessarily question oriented, but hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? Whether it's, sourcing going into Q4 or maybe adjusting strategies to offload maybe some old inventory before you get a big influx of inventory going into Q4, a lot of different moving pieces for this time of the year. So whether it's specifically ore related, whether it's just selling on Amazon in general related, or maybe it might be your first time selling during this period. So any kind of questions, theories, best practices, happy to provide any insight wherever it may be helpful for you.
Yeah. One thing that's kind of been top of mind for me is just data, just looking at like different KPIs and what I like to call like the latent potential of data. I think there's a strong amount of data that is just not utilized or is underutilized just in e-commerce as a whole when you really like take a step back and look at it. There's a gap where you're not a data analyst, you don't have the capacity or the intelligence, and I don't mean you as an individual, but I mean like you don't have like human intelligence available to work on these things. In an ideal world you would, right? But you just don't. So it's like you either have to hire somebody to do that, use technology, or carve out the time. I think for a lot of the newer sellers, carving out the time is probably the best route for right now. Technology is just not quite there. We're really on the cusp. I've been reading up on the latest OpenAI GPT-o1 model, and I've been playing around with the preview. It's pretty interesting because a lot of what they're doing, it's the same GPT-4 model as I understand it, but they did training slightly different. And so now what it does is it's actually thinking before giving an answer. And so what's interesting about that is the answers tend to be much better, right? Kind of like a human, right? If we anthropomorphize this for a second, the longer you think about a problem, the probability of you having a better answer or finding the solution goes up dramatically. And obviously over time, it's going to plateau. So what if AI kind of did the same thing instead of just saying, well, what do I know? And then just here's exactly what I know. And more so just having it internally break down the problem and rationalize through it. A lot of the benchmarks that people have been using for these models typically has been, it gets 1 out of the 8 benchmarks right. And like, that's kind of the consistent census right now. But with O1, it's the inverse. It's like it got 1 wrong, but like I see how it rationalized through it. And like there's a false rationalization. And so people are starting to think up new benchmarks because we just leaped in theory from base GPT-4, which was considered like a smart high school student in terms of intelligence, to like a PhD graduate. That's a big leap, right? And the basis that I've been looking at, I've seen benchmarks where the IQ level of this new model is basically median, so 100. I've also seen it go up to 120, 130 on other benchmarks. So kind of a big deal, which is nice. I think being able to gain access to those things, and pair it with your data is going to be a massive leap forward for a lot of sellers, especially when it's just you, right? And most of the sellers I talk to, it's just them in the business. They're not hiring people You might hire VAs and stuff like that, but most of the time you're not hiring VAs to do data analysis. You're hiring them to do sourcing for the most part, right? They might be placing orders and stuff, but and maybe as I'm talking about this, maybe more sellers should be hiring, one VA even part-time to say, hey, listen, you're my data analyst. Like go get a VA with a little bit more education on the business front. And have them basically come in and say, hey, your sole job is to analyze all the data that's here and find unique insights that we can then bake into our strategy, whether that's we should avoid this category or triple down over here, or we should order more of this or less of that. I've yet to really hear anybody mention that they do that. I think most of the time it's like they do regular admin stuff or sourcing, and it's predominantly sourcing unless it's like a personal assistant kind of role. So
Sure.
That's kind of interesting now that I'm thinking about it. It's like, why hasn't that been done? It's either a knowledge problem, right? Like you just haven't thought about it, which is very likely to be the case, or some other kind of impediment. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I know we always talk about making, data informed decisions on office hours very frequently. Sometimes, like you said, it's a bandwidth issue. As more and more data becomes available, sometimes it's being able to access that data or find it in a very easy to read or view or observe format. But then I think on top of that, we always talk about the forever changing landscape of selling on Amazon, and maybe there are times when you need to reshape how you're thinking about the data that's in front of you. I know historically we've talked about, it was all about winning the buy box. But as we've talked about on here, with so many sellers in the Amazon space, now that buy box price continues to get less and less advantageous for sellers as there's downward pressure on that price. Obviously, that's why we created Maven, help find that optimal price and that optimal, point at which you still get sales, maybe at a slower rate, but a higher margin. So maybe it's time to shift your primary data point from buy box ownership to just overall margin. Obviously, sales velocity is still going to bake into that, so you don't hold on to inventory for too long and all those other kind of factors to take into account. But maybe it is time to kind of reshape, like, hey, if I take a little bit less velocity here, more margin, I'm actually coming out more in the green there. So let's double down on that strategy item, whatever it may be. So yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those things, between lack of bandwidth, lack of access to data, and then perhaps needing to kind of become a little bit more modern or adapt in terms of how you're looking at that data specifically.
Yeah, humans are really good at what's called system one thinking. Daniel Kahneman wrote a book called, I think it's System 1, System 2 thinking, might just be System 2 thinking. It's real big in behavioral economics. And basically his argument is System 2 thinking, which is like deep rationalization, logic, and stuff like that, is really energy consuming as a species, and therefore we don't do it that often. It's really difficult. System 1 are like your analogies, like how do we make something conceptually simplified so we can move faster, make faster decisions. Both are important, but there are things that kind of just require System 2. And so I think what we've done as an industry, which again makes total sense, is we've really relied on the System 1 kind of concept, which is buy box more equals good. And while that's not inherently wrong, there is a law of diminishing return with this, right? Is it that 100% buy box ownership is better than 50% buy box ownership? Not necessarily, because now you're trading something, which is your profit margin. And so we have to shift our thinking as sellers to more nuance, which again is more difficult, right? And I love when I get these hardcore questions and people are kind of expecting a simplistic answer because it's pithy and it's easy to remember and apply. And I'm like, well, it depends. And like, saying it depends to a question always feels like a cop out, but the reality of it is mathematically, it does depend. It depends on a few different variables and what's happening. Like it depends on your cash flow, liquidity, and all these other different things at play. So, to be able to use something like an AI that can think and rationalize with you could, in theory, speed up that System 2 level problem set that a lot of people, I think, just avoid. I think a lot of sellers are just avoiding it because you're already busy. You're already just like, I need to feed the beast, right? More orders. But what you're not realizing is if you pause for a second, you might be able to find some higher leverage decisions that would far outweigh you just hustling more. That's not always the case. Sometimes you're hyper optimized and it's like, yeah, absolutely. Just keep feeding the beast. What you have here is working really, really well. But you need to be able to rely on the data to then inform your strategy to make better decisions. And that's what's time consuming and costly energy wise. So something to think about. See, Adam here. I need to figure out a buy box targeting strategy to sell out of items that won't sell with Maven. Casey, I'll let you have that one.
Yeah, Adam. So there's a couple different options here. I guess a little bit of a question for you would be, are you trying to fully liquidate these items or just improve that sales velocity? If you are just trying to improve that sales velocity, we do have a help article around building our buy box targeting strategy. The recommended settings are actually the preset settings in that strategy in your dashboard are going to be our best recommendations for winning the buy box from your competition. So I recommend starting there. That should improve that sales velocity for you. The one section where you may want to focus is in the min and max price section. That'll be the one area that's not necessarily optimized for your business. A lot of variations come into account when it comes to setting mins and maxes. So you'll just want to double check that section. That would be my first recommendation, starting with that buy box targeting strategy. If you do get to a point where you're really just trying to liquidate those items, we do also have a separate help article around liquidation. It is still going to be through a buy box targeting strategy, just tweaking a couple other settings, specifically bringing down that minimum ROI to just break even and get rid of that inventory before you start getting hit with additional fees. But that's where I would recommend starting that specific buy box targeting strategy. With those pre-configured settings, it's going to be pricing below the buy box winner by 2 cents. The maintenance section set to kind of maximize those margins within the buy box. So I'd recommend starting there and then adjusting to the liquidation strategy if need be. And I'll actually post the links in the comments for those 2 articles for you just in one moment. I'll pull them up on my end for you.
Awesome. And I did throw up on the screen there for a second, help.goor.com is where you can find all these things. But yeah, Casey will send you the direct links to those as well. And Joshua, it looks like you have a question here. Can you go ahead and just clarify exactly what that question is? I just want to make sure I can dive deep on that and be as accurate as possible. See, John, any way we can set prices in USD for CAD and have it pull in current conversion rates so we don't have to look at it manually? Not currently. That's something we are looking at. So what we do right now is we localize the data being put in, right? So if you're putting it in as CAD, or if you're selling on CAD, we want to make sure that you're inputting that as CAD. The thing we can't necessarily do, because currency fluctuations can happen very quickly and often 24/7. The issue in you putting in 25 USD and us converting it to CAD is that we can't update it in real time because you bought it at a specific time. So realistically, that value should be like frozen, if you will, based on the current conversion when you put it in. So just something to keep in mind. We kind of do that intentionally just because 25 USD to CAD, that could be 27 CAD right now, but 2 days from now, that could be 30 CAD. And that's not really, you didn't pay 30 CAD for it. You actually paid 25 USD and that's a held constant. So something to keep in mind with, but we are looking at more the currency conversions style stuff. That's not to say that we couldn't actually just, freeze it ourselves, but that creates a lot of other issues at a system level. So we do want to think through those more robustly, for lack of a better term here. There are some things that seem to make a lot of sense on the surface, but when you really get into the nitty gritty of it, the granulars of it, there gets created edge cases that we have to be able to consider pretty heavily. But great question though. Love that one. Yeah. Currency's a fun thing. They fluctuate. It's funny because I was a finance major and my hardest class was actually international finance because there was only 2 exams. And he was a tenured professor. So he's like, you either pass or you fail. That's on you. And each exam was 4 questions, which is daunting. But we looked at like currency arbitrage. And basically the conclusion we came to is arbitrage doesn't really work anymore. As markets become more and more efficient, more accessible, the arbitrage opportunity goes down. So there was something called the triangle arbitrage, where you would basically trade into one currency to get into a third currency to go back to the first currency. And that was your arbitrage. You can technically still do it, but it's like fractions of a penny. So like you're either doing stupidly high volumes or stupidly fast. So algorithmic trading comes into play. So now currency's gotten a little tighter, which is nice for the most part. outside of things like Venezuela, hyperinflation, things of that nature. But I don't think many people are selling in Venezuela or buying in Venezuela right now. Actually, there's a place near me. It's like a coin collector kind of place. They have a bunch of cool stuff, and they had I think it's the $10 billion Zimbabwe dollar. It's like legit a 10 billion Zimbabwe dollar.
That's crazy.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. That's hyperinflation for you. Let's see, John. But as a multi-million-dollar seller, a once-a-day conversion would be better than me having to have hours of labor looking at it. True, but you really shouldn't have to look at it outside of the one time, right? So again, if you bought it at 25, you do the conversion that day, put it in, and that's a held constant. Like that should not really be fluctuating. That kind of goes back to my original point. You really shouldn't have to be running currency conversions every single day outside of new inventory. That's its own thing. But if you mean like once a day, as in like, we just take all the new stuff and then do it, that's a different story for sure. Great question though. Keep the questions coming. Again, this is open office hours. So, we'll just kind of jam here for a bit, but definitely bring any questions you have related to repricing or as a product, selling in general, all that good stuff. Let's see. Can you explain how Maven handles listings with a minimum price, no competition, and limited historical data? In such cases that the seller doesn't know the optimal price, how does Maven test pricing strategies to find the best price and sales velocity when there's only one seller? Great question. So we are still able to calculate an optimal price, but it gets better over time as we get more data. So a good example here, let's say you come in at $50 and velocity is pretty good. So we actually raise you up to 65 as an example. If we see that the BSR is starting to rise pretty steadily, we'll start to pull that back. So you'll see it fluctuate. So actually, if you put Maven on a listing where you're the only seller, you will see the price fluctuate up and down from time to time. It's not purely linear, which is kind of frustrating. Like you can't just go to 65 and be like, cool, that's great. The dynamics are shifting pretty heavily, right? Like the demand's going to change pretty rapidly as price goes up or down, of course. But we can still find that optimal price. We've tested this internally, which is pretty nice. I think it was not a Stanley, I think it was a Yeti cup, and we came in at like 60 something, ended up jacking it up to 85, got some sales, raised it to 95, got a few sales, but the BSR started to rise. So we pulled it back down, and then another seller jumped on, and we were actually competing higher than when we initially came in, which is good. So you can still do that for sure. We're still calculating the optimal price, just like if there were competition. That's what's nice. It doesn't require competition to calculate that. But it definitely helps having more data for sure. See, Ryan, I'm seeing a few situations where our FBM SKU is seemingly repricing against our own FBA SKU. No other competition is at a price that would drive our price down, and our FBM SKU is pricing exactly 1% below our FBA SKU. What could possibly be causing this? Casey, do you have any input on this one?
So I guess the first question there, Ryan, would be if it's assigned to a Maven strategy, it won't specifically direct or compete directly with your own SKU. With that being said, it will take that offer as data to inform its pricing decisions. So if it is assigned to a Maven strategy, that data will still be kind of included in its calculations. So that may be the case if you have it assigned to Maven. If it is a rules-based strategy, or it does recognize multiple SKUs within the same marketplace. So in that case, it should be excluding it from that competition. But I would assume perhaps it's the Maven situation. If not, definitely feel free to ping into support with the specific SKUs where you're seeing that. Finn is in the inbox right now, so he'll jump in, be able to help you out there. If he's not able to help you, I'll be back in the inbox in about 45 minutes and I can take a look. But like I said, if it is a Maven situation, it will still look at that as data and price accordingly. But if it is rules based, your own offers should be excluded from that specific competition there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is like I would definitely reach out to support and then have us take a look at that more directly and see what might be going on. It's just going to be easier with that data to be able to let you know exactly what's happening. Nice, good question though.
I'd be curious to see if anyone has any like specific strategies, not necessarily Aura strategies, but just overall Q4 strategies. If you're sourcing, a particular type of product, if you're trying to focus on, hey, I'm only getting X amount of inventory for this specific item, but more for a different one. If anyone
Mhm.
has kind of any specific approaches and want to just kind of have a round table around whether that may be a good approach, maybe some ways to tweak it for better performance, would love to hear where people are kind of thinking and attacking the upcoming quarter here.
Yeah, that just reminded me. I just created a task for myself. I was talking with Saul um, at AMZ United about Amazon to Amazon flips, and he's like, "Man, we really need to work on a repricing strategy for A to A." So I'm going to ping him. Actually, I just remembered to ping him so we could kind of jam on that because A to A is starting to grow pretty heavily. It's funny. It's very similar to how in-game mechanics work, which is so hilarious. Having played MMOs as a child or even recently. They're very much the same thing, right? You're just finding the arbitrage moments in the market itself, which is so interesting. And I'm seeing people actually spend a decent amount of money on inventory being able to do this. So it's far more scalable than I originally thought it would be. But in that model requires some kind of tweaks in how you're repricing things of that nature. You want to make sure you're coming in much higher. You're not just immediately liquidating things of that nature. But pretty cool stuff. It's fun that we're still finding kind of new models, or like people have played with the model, but nobody really has attempted to scale it until recently. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, there's a strategy here. Like there's not just like these random things that you can do every now and then, but this is actually a full set model that you could really scale out and do pretty well with. So pretty cool. But it also kind of highlights how you, to a certain degree, need multiple models to really scale. Are there 7-figure sellers that, or even 8-figure sellers that solely do one model? Yeah, in pretty much every case that is true. But for, I think, the average person who's not building like a massive team in the United States and things of that nature, you kind of need to focus on one, really maximize it. And then if you're finding you're kind of hitting a plateau, then consider maybe introducing a secondary model that you do in parallel that you can start to ramp up. So now you have multiple business units, kind of a thing. So it's kind of interesting. It always comes back to these nuances that we've been jamming about, right? Like I would say the same thing about marketplaces. I think a lot of sellers would be naive to jump onto Amazon and Walmart at the same time because they are two different marketplaces. Granted, there's a lot of similarities, but I think, listen, maximize the demand. Like basically take the easy path first, right? Like path of least resistance, go ham on Amazon, then start to diversify because there's a few different things. You have risk there in case you get Section 3, whatever. So like you should do that earlier than I think you should have a year ago, in my opinion. Like my views on it has definitely changed, but not doing that too early is the thing, right? Like it's very similar to the shiny object syndrome, right? Like, well, I'm going to try OA and then I'm immediately going to, next month try wholesale. It's like, you haven't even given OA enough time to know if it works for you or not. Like you really need to dedicate like a year to something to really gain enough experience and enough exposure to figure things out. So I would say like my thoughts on stuff like that, you should do them earlier than you should have a year ago, but still take some time to like get to that point. It's very easy to just want to do it all and build an empire overnight. That's just not how it works. Unfortunately, I wish it was.
Yeah, and it does take more time to get kind of an accurate test or an accurate trial run in a specific space. So if you are only giving it a few weeks and you only get a few inches into the ground, if you will, and you go to another one, then you only get a few inches into the ground, it's better to spend more time, get deeper, either confirm or deny that it is working well, and then adjusting accordingly. Obviously, if you get to a point where you feel like you've got Amazon pretty much figured out, you want to jump into Walmart, eBay, another space, definitely don't hesitate to do that. But obviously bandwidth and there's only so much time in a day. You don't want to spread yourself too thin, especially if you
Exactly.
have something that's working. You don't want to jeopardize affecting that performance by allocating too many resources elsewhere. So definitely a balance, but want to give it some time to kind of get up and running, but then also kind of tweak some things and optimize
Hmm.
performance, whether it's sourcing strategies, repricing itself, a lot of different moving pieces for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you should give a minimum of a year to test anything and then commit 10 years to actually pulling it off. Like realistically, that's how long things take to really get good at stuff. Um, I wish it was shorter. That's just not the case.
Yeah, what is it? The 10,000 hours theory? Is that what it is?
Yeah, the 10,000 hours theory. You hear that, but you also hear like the 80/20. I forget
Yeah.
there's a book that he basically tries to dispel the myth of 10,000 hours. And like Tim Ferriss does this pretty heavily too on stuff like, well, if you 80/20 things, realistically, you can get 80% of the way there by doing 20% of the work. So it's really not 10,000 hours. Like it's 10,000 hours to mastery, but it's far less to get up to 80%, which I do believe that. I think both are true. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, 10,000 hours to actually master something, but you can get 80% of the way there and 20% of the time pretty well if you know what you're doing and you know how to study and learn and execute and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always those last few percentage points that take the most time to kind of really
Yeah.
level up. I mean, you get to a point where it is going to be a lot of time spent to make a couple minor differences in performance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think both of those theories are true, and it's just about, do you want to spend the time to get to the master level, or is that 80% sufficient enough?
Right.
It's all about kind of prioritizing that, determining where your time is best spent for sure.
Yeah. And I've always said, like, I don't think everybody needs to be a 7 or an 8-figure seller. Um, I've talked to a number of people that are doing 6 figures and they're happy living the dream life for them. And like, well, I just need to keep pushing. I'm like, why? Yeah. I mean, like, not like you shouldn't, but like, what's the reason behind that? And growth is always good. Don't get me wrong. But if you don't actually want that big of a business, why would you build it? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of your decision at the end of the day. And most people are just looking for confirmation that like they can be happy where they're currently at, which is like a weird founder problem because
Mhm.
it's always more and more and more. That's just how we're wired. Not to say that that's a good thing. It's definitely not a bad thing either. But I think it's very easy. Like we're really good at moving the goalposts. That's what we do, right? I'm known to do this. Certainly, you hit a massive revenue milestone. You're like, cool. How do we double it? You're like, dude, it's been like 30 seconds. What are we doing here? Like, yeah, it's a problem. But listen, that's how it works, right? Let's see. John, I have 17 years on the internet. I built a multi-million-dollar machine. If I could do it over again, I would stop around 500,000. You know what I mean? Again, neither is right or wrong, but it is kind of interesting. Sometimes things being smaller is actually 10 times better. Or we just fantasize about it. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. I fantasize about when we were doing very little revenue, but it was just like early and everything was new. We're like, oh my gosh, but I wouldn't trade that for now, obviously, because it still feels that way, just kind of different. You always kind of fantasize about the early days, right? What's the quote from The Office? It's like, I wish you could know when you're in the good old days
Yeah.
before they leave. I'm like, yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes. Yeah, I wish I knew I was in the good times before I actually left them.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But funny enough, you're probably like that's always the case, right? Like now's the
Yeah.
good old days, like, all right.
There's a little bit of the grass is always greener syndrome. It's always
Yes.
going to be looking further. But yeah, I mean, you get to a point where you build something that's so big, then you're putting in more work than you
Yeah.
initially thought was required, and kind of become a little bit of like a servant to the project or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, my dad always talked about it when he bought his first house. He's like, "Oh, I always thought I wanted a house, and then I moved out of my apartment, and then I have to mow the lawn every other week, or all that other stuff around management."
Yeah.
But um, yeah, literally
You
in that
real
example, the grass is greener. But
yeah. I mean, you have to realize like things getting bigger means more responsibility. You know, it doesn't just mean bigger paychecks. It means more responsibility because the things required to get there are more people, more risk, things of that nature, which always falls back on you as a founder. Which is why not everybody is. Like, they're like, I would never do that. I'm like, I get that. I totally get it. I can't not do it, which is its own thing. But yeah, you know, it's I think a lot. It's very easy to build a business that you end up not loving, but like it was kind of your decision, but you felt kind of peer pressure to like do bigger because, you know, this is like a big social media rant for a second, but like, you know, you're always seeing, and this is true in a multitude of different facets of life, but you're always seeing everybody else's highlights, right? You're always seeing the amazing parts, you know, that last 10%. And it's like, oh, well, this 20-year-old's doing 10 million a month in revenue, or this 19-year-old made $80 million. And now you're comparing yourself to that, which one, you don't even know if that's true. Most of those are found out to be scams anyways. And two, even if it is true, like, we're not all Mark Zuckerberg, and that's cool too. You know, I used to think like, oh, I have to have this amazing, unique idea like Zuck. No, you don't. And like, honestly, I'm not that dude. I didn't go to MIT. Like, come on. You know, like, why would I compare myself to somebody who clearly has a much higher IQ than me and like is insane? Or like Musk, you know, I look up to Musk quite a bit in some facets, and it's like, yeah, never going to be that dude. And honestly, that's totally fine. Like, I don't even think I would want to be. Like, looking at his schedule, no, there's no way. But like, that's okay too. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need like $100 billion business. Like, that's really fine. Like, if we pull it off, awesome. But like, I don't need it, you know? But it is kind of funny when you get this far into business, you kind of realize like, it's kind of whatever you want. Like, want it to be small? Cool. Want to be big? Cool. Like, again, it all depends. What do you want to do? But I think sellers, again, this kind of goes back to like taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, looking at data and things of that nature, is like, ultimately, what do you want to build and why are you building it? Because no matter what business you choose, it's going to be hard, period. So you have to have a really strong why behind why you're doing that thing. And so, you know, some people are starting Amazon businesses that shouldn't be because they're doing it to make enough cash flow to then go start this web design agency. I'm like, just go start the web design agency. Why are you putting it off? You know, like, you think you're being strategic, but actually you're just kind of, you know, you're avoiding fear of failure, basically, is what you're doing. So, see, John, following up here, not only profit, the business is meant to make you happy with making your income. Exactly. Money's good, but you know, my go-to analogy when people are like, yeah, but I can make more money doing that. I'm like, yeah, you can make a lot of money being a drug dealer, but would you enjoy it? No. Okay. So like, if you agree with that statement, then it is relative. You know what I mean? You got to enjoy what you're doing for sure. And you know, this is why I shut down my Amazon business when I was a seller. When we started this, you know, a lot of my seller friends were like, you're an idiot. What are you doing? I'm like, well, this is what I've always wanted to do. This is, you know, the thing that gets me the most excited. I love tech, and like, yeah, you know, this works for me. Was that the right decision for the next person? Probably not. Maybe. But yeah, I think fundamentally you got to have that why, and that why could be, you know, your family. It could be, you know, helping your spouse be able to quit a job that they hate, and like, you make enough to like it not be a big deal, or put your kids through college, or, you know, gain freedom, whatever it makes sense. But you're going to have days and weeks and months that are just grueling and grindful. And you're just going to have to be like, cool, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm willing to go through all these things, because of that why. If that why is strong enough, you're fine. You know, even when it's like the worst of the worst, you're like, still good here. You know, like, it sucks, but like, there's a reason to my sacrifice, right? You got to have reasons to struggle. Otherwise, what's the point in struggling? So if you're doing it just to make money, I think it's, to me, kind of boring. I don't know. That's me. I'm a little bit more philosophical about capitalism.
No, I mean, I definitely agree. I was in sales for so long, and then it was all about exchanging that lifestyle for a different lifestyle. You know, that definitely turns into a hamster wheel at a certain point. I have a lot of friends who are still in that space, and they're built for it, and that's great. I just kind of ran out of my fuse and had to jump out. So yeah, I'm very thankful for that time and all the knowledge I learned in that area of business. It definitely applies to a lot of different areas, but much more fun to help you folks out and make sure you guys are all set up for success. So yeah, it's definitely a good adjustment.
Yeah. That's the cool thing about what we do here is like, especially the testimonials we get of people being like, oh, like I was doing 30 grand a month and like still working my job. And now I'm doing like 80. And that's because you guys, and I quit my job and I'm doing this full time. All right. That's pretty exciting. Like, like that's kind of going to get you out of bed in the morning, to realize you're having an impact and stuff like that. And like, James and I have always been that way. It's like, what can we have the biggest impact on? Not just like what makes the most money. Like, because again, you can go be a drug dealer, but you don't want to do that. So like, you got to have a positive impact. And I think that was the thing that really like initially when we were like playing around with the idea, when we started to get that feedback, I was like, oh, this is nice. I like this. I've never had like that level. I mean, when I was a personal trainer, I had that certainly, but not like at scale, or somebody I've never talked to just emails me and was like, hey, I just want to say thanks. I'm like, that's cool. Like that just made my month, like, all right, let's keep going. So it's fun though. I think if you find that thing, it's very exciting. And I think you can find that in pretty much anything, maybe except for being a drug dealer. I don't know. Never been one. So I imagine it's not very impactful in a positive way. That's just my assumption, but who knows? Everybody's different. I don't know. But I did see on Twitter or X that Amazon is coming to TikTok Shop. So that's going to be very interesting. I don't know when it's going live. I think Reezy posted about it. I'm going to pull it up here. If they go live before Q4, it's going to be huge. Buy with Prime is coming to TikTok Shop. This is wild. People are going to be are going to absolutely eat this Q4. So hopefully before Q4, but that's huge. I mean, that's, I wrote a blog post basically going into the Amazon influencer program because a lot of people are starting to explore that and people are talking about it as like a little side hustle. So I wanted to explore it and understand it better myself, but very interesting thing. And TikTok Shop is really starting to grow. I was talking to somebody last night actually who she's like, I buy stuff off all the time, but her biggest complaint was it takes forever to get to me. I was like, okay, so it's coming from China. That's a dead giveaway. But what if it wasn't? What if it was actual Prime? Like, could they actually do geolocation the way they do right now on Amazon, right? Like they know I'm going to send you, I'm going to prioritize these products because they're close enough to you. Could they basically port that system over to TikTok Shop? I don't see why not. I don't know. That gets kind of interesting. So we might see a huge channel unlock for Amazon for new growth, which is kind of cool. I don't know how big the sales are on TikTok Shop. I imagine they're not massive quite yet, but it is starting to grow and take off, right? That's a whole other segment of the market in terms of age for the most part that you get to unlock. I think Amazon's been mainly our generation as the youngest. Granted, everybody knows about Amazon, but from a marketing standpoint, I think it's mainly been our generation as the youngest. And with them going into that new channel and not just promoting products, but saying, hey, you can buy through this channel, that is a massive potential unlock there. So hopefully it will lead to an increase in conversions and things of that nature for sellers,
Definitely.
which is nice. I mean, people complain about Amazon fees all day long. I've always said, listen, it's their house. There's a lot of things you now don't have to do because you're paying those fees. And this is one of them. They do these massive market level strategy plays and you just get to not do anything and get increased performance for no work on your part. That's kind of nice. So something to consider. So I'm curious if anybody is playing with TikTok Shop or is beta-ing this Amazon TikTok thing. Definitely comment in the comment section because I'm curious how it's going so far.
Yeah, I'd be curious as well. I mean, in my experience in the Shopify space, that was really when TikTok was taking off and it was really essential for people driving traffic to their websites. We had a handful of people. I worked with a couple of clients who sold like the Mexican spicy gummies where they like mix the gummies with like, it's like tahini or whatever. And this woman, her website looked like it was built by a 12-year-old and she was viral on TikTok and she was clearing like 200K a month, selling out like almost immediately. So just like the viral nature of TikTok is definitely going to help folks move product faster. One thing I would be interested in is it's definitely going to emphasize the importance of sourcing even more, in my opinion. If you jump on a TikTok trend too late, there could be
Yeah.
dozens of other sellers already on that listing that maybe got a better buy price than you. Then you start to look into long-term inventory storage fees or whatever that is. So
Yeah.
I think, as always, it's going to boil back to sourcing. But if there's a way to get great exposure on a product, a specific category of products, that's always great. But yeah, if anyone is piloting that or testing that, I would be curious how that's been going. Like, you'll see on Instagram, one video will have 1 million views. On TikTok, it'll have 5 million views. So just like
Yeah.
the viral nature of that platform would be definitely
Mhm.
impactful for sales. But pros and cons with everything. I'd be interested to see what some of the pitfalls may be as well.
Yeah. With it having primarily been direct to the source and now them adding third-party sellers to that, I am curious to see how that changes in terms of what products are being able to go out. So this
Mhm.
kind of reminds me of the concept of increasing your surface area of luck. This is like a big concept in entrepreneurship, which is like, if you want to do a tech startup, are you going to be luckier in SF in San Francisco than Ohio? Yes. Okay, so go move there and increase your surface area of luck, or networking, whatever. You can kind of parlay this over into products, right? As you diversify the channels you're on, the not the channels, the categories you're selling on, the types of products you're on. Because it's going to be really hard. You're not going to be able to predict what goes viral. Like, you as an individual seller just don't have the data for that. I'm sure there's some analytics you could look into to see like what's kind of gaining some traction. That might be very helpful. But in terms of like these massive upswings like Casey's talking about, you're probably just going to have to be well diversified and increasing your surface area of luck and hope that one of those things gets picked up. But I imagine there's got to be some nice analytics that Amazon will be working on to let you know the source of sales, right? So to be able to know this came from TikTok Shop and be able to say, okay, well, let's look at the data here. What categories do really well there? Maybe I need to triple down on those categories to increase my surface area of luck, so to speak. I'm hoping that will be the case. I don't see why it wouldn't be. But Amazon might be slower to roll that out. But I don't know. This is going to be, in theory, pretty big deal. But, so again, it could very much shift your sourcing strategy. If you can get access to the data to kind of influence that. Oh, this is great. See, for those on trial or considering a repricer, during my trial, gross sales dropped 10%, but net profits surged from 17% to 29.6%. I highly recommend testing it yourself. I thought repricing was just about lowering prices. I was wrong. Thank you. So glad you brought this up, right? This is what we're talking about at the beginning of the conversation. Like, it's a nuanced thing. What we've historically done is said, we're going to say success equals one of two things. My total sales went up, or my buy box ownership percentage went up. There's a trade-off in doing that, and nobody's really talked about it until recently for some odd reason. And there is the balance. There is a nuance to it where, yeah, like, your sales went down that 10%, like you mentioned, but you're making dramatically more money with the same inventory. That's huge. And I would bet if you were to switch up your sourcing style just a little bit, you could actually recover those gross sales pretty readily. But yeah, I'm so glad you highlighted this. I appreciate that. Grateful to have you on board. It's a good thing, and I think it was last week somebody jumped in and was like, actually, my sales went up and my profit went up. You're right. So like, this just goes to show that everybody's in like a slightly different area. It could have been, because I always think through this lens of that balance that Maven's designed for, right? Sales velocity and profitability. What happens with a lot of sellers is they're too over index on sales velocity and under index on profitability. So the sales look really nice, but they're missing out on the potential of the profit margin here. And so what Maven's going to do is going to rebalance you. So yeah, you might see a slowdown in sales velocity, but a massive increase in profitability. In some cases, it's the inverse. Somebody's a little too conservative on the pricing. And so the profit margin looks really nice, but their velocity is 40% of what it could be. We reallocate that. It's like, yeah, we increased your sales velocity, but we decreased your profit margin. Why? Because you were out of balance. So this is a better way to think about repricing. It's not just one metric went up or down. It's really how am I balanced right now? Because you don't want to move inventory too fast and you don't want to move it too slow either. And that balance is going to shift on every listing every minute, in theory. So something to think about. So I'm glad you brought that up. See, this is the stuff that gets me excited. Minimum work, increase in profitability by like a lot. Like that's insane. Absolutely insane. Like almost double the profitability.
Yeah. And that's where like that optimal price comes in. Obviously, we talk about that all the time with Maven, but
Yeah.
that's the main goal. If you do kind of exchange that, 10% gross sales like they did there, I mean, you're going to see potentially a huge upswing, a couple more minor tweaks, maybe bring that sales velocity back up. It is kind of a plug and play game and swapping out different strategies. And Finn's actually working right now on a 3 kind of stages, phases, or levels, however you want to kind of look at them, an article about, hey, when you first have inventory come in, you want to start with Maven, maximize that margin on those listings. After a few weeks, maybe you want to trickle a little bit or lean a little bit more towards the sales velocity side of things, make an adjustment to the buy box strategy. And then thirdly, hey, those long-term storage fees are about to kick in. Let's just liquidate. So it is definitely kind of a few different moving pieces there, but those 3 strategies really do kind of cover a lot of those different phases. I'd say, like we were talking earlier, 80-20. I would say that covers about that 80% of scenarios there. But yeah, keep an eye out for that article, folks. We'll definitely be publishing that soon, and that'll just help kind of digest and give you a better sense. Hey, how do I manage my account long term with various inventory in its different stages as well?
Yeah. That's what's kind of nice about what we're doing. Like we're really putting together like the framework for how to do this, not just be like, oh, here's all the things you can do. It's like, well, a sandbox sounds nice, but if you don't know what to build or how to build it, it's kind of irrelevant. You have the blank page problem, which is just like, I could do anything. Great. What do you want to do? I don't know. Like it's our job to look at the data, going back to being data driven and to understand, okay, well, for the average seller, what really is how they should be thinking about this? What are the strategies that they should and should not be using? And when should they use those certain things? So what we're trying to do is say, okay, well, here's the framework in a way that is easy to understand and easy to implement without it being, have these 15 strategies and like all this crazy complexity, and just say, no, like, let's boil it down. The explain like I'm 5 kind of version, because that's how it should be. Like we should be able to obfuscate, abstract away the complexities for you and say, these are really the only like key 3 things you need to know to really crush it. And like, yeah, there's going to be some exceptions there, but lean on us for those exceptions. Just jump into support. Be like, hey, I've got a really weird scenario. Great. We can jump in and help there too. So, our big thing is like, how are we helping scale our impact by making things simple? Going back to that system 1 versus system 2 thinking, it's like our job is system 2. Your job as the user is system 1, and we should be able to conceptualize what system 1 actually is, so you don't have to figure it out yourself, because that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I've been focusing a lot more in terms of how we build our articles or email support, focusing on the why you want to do something, because we've got a whole knowledge base on how you can do things within the platform, but now you need to know why and where or how, or essentially where you can do that within the platform. Sorry, all the 5 W's getting
who, what, when, where, why.
Exactly. Yeah. But focusing on why, because, hey, it may be new to you, but this is why you want to look at things, hopefully kind of synthesize some of that better performance, maybe a little drop off in sales, higher margin, overall gross. So definitely a lot of moving pieces. And like we said, landscape changes so frequently. We want to make sure we're helping keeping you folks up to date and in the know on those new trends, strategies, best practices, things of that nature.
Yeah. See, John, how long does it take for a new strategy to kick in once I switch a listings strategy from Maven to rule-based? So that is immediate. So what's nice is we have listing memory is what we call it. So we actually store the most recent offer change information. So the moment you make a strategy change, either changing the settings in your strategy, changing the strategy being used, mins, maxes, all that good stuff, the moment you hit save on that, the system's checking, do I need to make a change based on those changes? And if it does, it'll immediately trigger that out. So if you're using Hyperdrive, less than 10 seconds. If you're not using Hyperdrive, could be a few minutes, call it a minute and a half, 2 minutes on average. But we're immediately reassessing the most recent price change to say, okay, well, based on that one, what should we do? And then moving forward, it's all up to date stuff. So pretty immediate, especially with the rule base. Rule base is very explicit, knows exactly what to do. Boom, boom, boom. Switching over to Maven is going to take a little bit longer because it's going to analyze more data, make more strategic decisions. But going from Maven to rule base, again, should be pretty immediate. If you don't see a price change, it may not have needed to make one. So keep that in mind too, right? There are cases where it's like, actually, I'm not going to make a price change because there's no reason to, but pretty immediate. So good question. I haven't been asked that one in a while. I know we're running up on time here. So any last questions, go ahead and send those our way. Happy to dive deep into anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, Casey, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're good. The replay system is definitely beneficial even for us in support. There is a button actually on the individual listings page. If you think there should have been a price change, you can hit that replay button. It'll kind of reinitiate that last price change, make sure that all of your settings are essentially double checked by the system, making sure there maybe is a price update that needs to be made. But yeah, it definitely helps us kind of sort through things and allows that immediate update when you make any changes to strategies. That does also immediately come into play if you make any changes on the listing itself, whether it's mins, maxes, costs. If you maybe update your min and max range and your price is outside of that range, or is going to replay that last price change, make sure that you are brought within your new set range, just as an example.
Yep, exactly. So any last minute questions here? We're happy to dive deep again into anything you guys have. Got some good questions today. It was good.
Yeah.
A lot of new stuff. I like that.
Yeah, I was going to say some we haven't had in a while. It's kind of some newer questions as well. So yeah, good mix today, definitely.
Yeah. Definitely appreciate everybody spending time with us as well. It's nice when we have these, kind of free flow of questions. We could dive deeper into a bunch of different things. And it keeps me from geeking out on AI. So that's always a good thing for you guys. But if there's no other questions, we may end a little bit early today, but we'll obviously hang out in case anything pops up.
Yeah. Any new movies or shows you've been checking out there, Dylan?
I'm a big fan of the show Evil. I think it just wrapped up. That's pretty great. Star Trek Lower Decks. That show's fantastic. It's like a cartoon version of it, but like kind of more parodying Star Trek in a way that's like respectful. So like, it's just kind of funny. So that's been pretty good, but not too much, saw the new Deadpool Wolverine movie. That was hilarious. That actually had me dying laughing. I've just been watching all the classic stuff from like childhood. So like the Page Master with Macaulay Culkin. Perfection. Showed my stepson that the other day. He's like, what even is this? I was like, well before your time, sir. But fantastic. So good. And a lot of documentaries. I've been really into documentaries lately.
Nice. Yeah, there's definitely been a lull in new movies being released. For those of you in the audience who don't know, I'm a massive movie fan. I go to the movies all the time, and I've been itching to go to the movies. There are a couple newer ones out. I'm going to see a movie called The Substance tonight. A little bit of like a semi-horror, dark comedy type movie.
Nice.
About like a drug you can take and become a younger, better version of yourself. And so that'll be interesting to kind of see the pitfalls of some of those decisions made by some of the characters. But yeah, any recommendations, always come into chat. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or just talk about movies and TV shows as well.
We're really just crowdsourcing movie ideas at Aura. Let's see. Magali, do you have a course or webinar for new users? Casey, I'll let you jump on that one.
Yeah, so not necessarily a specific course or webinar there, Magali. What I would recommend is if you go to help.goaura.com, you can pull up our quick start guide. I'll actually post that in the chat in 1 second here. But that's going to be essentially the 4 steps to get you up and running and repricing. There it is in the chat for you there. All of those specific steps do have their own article as well. If it's not immediately linked in that doc, you can find it by searching in the search bar. And all 4 of those steps do have a specific video to go along with them. And we are continually working on providing more video content. I've got kind of a hit list of different videos I'm going to be working on over the next couple weeks. But as always, if there's any area of the platform, anything specific that you're looking for, definitely feel free to reach out. Happy to make some specific videos there. And great. Looks like you did already go through those welcome steps. Definitely working on some more like optimization, ongoing management of your account type resources. So keep an eye out for those. And that'll just kind of help you stay up to speed within the platform following that initial setup.
Yeah. And if you have not scheduled an onboarding session, always recommend doing that. 20 minutes, it's free. Like we basically dive super deep into like your actual account instead of just like high level. Like it's not like a, pitch deck or anything like that. It's like we're actually screen sharing in your account with your data. That's always a good thing to do because it allows us to really personalize the recommendations based on what are you trying to accomplish here? What's important to you? And then like kind of looking at some of your data. Does that still make sense? Why or why not? So to schedule that, actually just jump into support in live chat in the bottom right. There's that blue icon. Click that and just say, hey, I'd love to schedule an onboarding session. We'll send you a schedule link and get you on the books. So super simple, super fast. Again, it's like 20 minutes, but we basically take you from I have a bunch of questions to you kind of feel super human using Aura, which is really nice.
Yeah, getting you to that 80%.
Exactly. Awesome. So I think we'll end there. Appreciate, again, everybody making the time to come chat with us, asking some amazing questions. We do this every Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. EST. No format, really. We just jump in, start to kind of nerd out on a few different things, and then just dive deep into each of your questions. But don't feel like you have to wait to ask us questions for these sessions. Definitely, don't hesitate to reach out to support, talk with Casey, talk with Finn, and just be able to get your answers super, super fast. But with that, we will let you get back to the rest of your week.
Yeah, have a good week, folks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.